All right, welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John. It's time for another reaction video. This week I have chosen the 2000 Chevy Monte Carlo SS. I am looking forward to sharing my thoughts about this bubulous, cheap, miserable mistake of a car. So yes, I have some opinions about it. I look forward to seeing what they said about it when it's brand spanking new. But as always, make yourself comfortable. You and I are just chatting here today. Grab your beverage of choice, just some leftover coffee this morning, and let's see what they said about it when it was new.
Motorweek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com.
Longtime Motorweek viewers have frequently heard us use the phrase, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Now that refers to car makers using racing success as a marketing tool. But despite the gigantic popularity of Winston Cup stock car racing, manufacturers have made little use of it in recent years. Or at least until this year. You see, Chevrolet has just released its 2000 Monte Carlo Coupe, a machine that bears more than a passing resemblance to its Winston Cup namesake. So are Mondays about to get a lot more exciting for Chevrolet dealers? They are, if the reactions that we saw while driving the 2000 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS are anything to go by. Everywhere we drove, we heard a common refrain. It sure looks like a race car. More specifically, the ground-shaking factory racers that Chevy campaigns in the NASCAR Winston Cup Stock Car Series. That instant connection with famous racing names like Earnhardt, Gordon, and Labonte is just what Chevy stylists had in mind when they pinned the lines for the latest Monte Carlo. The look is stockier than last year's Lumina look-alike, with a deep, aggressive nose wearing distinctive reflector optic headlamps and inset fog lamps, as well as a hefty squared-off spoiler-bedecked tail.
Okay, so first off, you know, that adage, win on Sunday, sell on Monday, you know, I think that had a lot of weight back in the day, but by the 2000s, did it really matter? Did anybody watch NASCAR and say, man, they've got a Monte Carlo going around the track, I got to get me one of those? They're not remotely related. They're sharing some styling cues and a name. And that, I don't know. I don't know if it really carries any weight. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm not passing judgment on that part of it. I am legitimately curious. Does it still apply? Moving on, styling. You may have picked up from my introduction, I really dislike this car. I really, really do. And there's multiple reasons on it. It's that 2000s bubulous styling. It's the headlights that, you know, they cut down and they're thin and bubulous, and the shape is rounded. And then back here at the back, there's just a lot back there. Some of the problem with this car, to me, is the proportions, and that comes from its front wheel drive proportions. And yes, I think it is arguable it is better looking than the previous one, which was just generic. This one at least had some style, even if I don't like it. But it shares some of that same awkwardness that the Buick Elante had when I did my reaction video of that. The front part of it doesn't look bad, but then it's like they didn't know what to do with the rear of it. I kind of feel the same way about this. Like the rear bumper back here and the rear trunk, it's all just chunky, and there seems to be a lot of that rear quarter panel, just chunky down the sides, around the door here. It looks all the world to me like a Ford Taurus from the 90s. And then the front, almost no grille and these globule headlights. The whole thing doesn't work for me. I'll have some thoughts about that at the end too.
And a profile so close to Winston Cup spec that future factory race cars will use production sheet metal in the hood, roof, and deck lid. But while NASCAR gets pushrod V8 power, Chevy opted to still equip the Street SS with a pushrod V6. But that's okay when it's GM's proven 3800 Series 2 V6. Its 3.8 liters now pumps out 200 horsepower and 225 pound-feet of torque. The base Monte Carlo gets GM's 180 horse 3.4 liter V6. And
let's just say, I'm not going to say anything bad about that engine. 3800 series, one of the best engines ever. I love it. 3.4 liter, my understanding, it was better than the 3.1. You know, and I always found the 3.4 and the 3.1 for that matter to be soulless. I don't know. They didn't make bad sounds, but they didn't make good sounds. They had power, but not an overwhelming feeling, right? They just always ended up being fine. But the 3800, yeah.
Its standard 4-speed automatic transmission delivers slow but very solid shifts. We wish for an American-style long-throw manual to further cement the banked oval connection. Though on our flat test track, the SS also acquits itself reasonably well with a best 0 to 60 time of 7.5 seconds and a quarter-mile run of 15.7 seconds at 89 miles per hour. Throttle response is very good, with the engine pulling strongly from idle to redline. Only the lazy gearbox held it back. The 3,300-pound Monte Carlo SS does well in the corners, too. Turn-in is slow and deliberate, but the car goes precisely where pointed both left and right. 16-inch tires and a tighter sports suspension control side-to-side transitions on the SS very well, despite notable body roll. And the power rack and pinion steering is accurate with a fine level of feedback.
You know, interesting results there. Saying the automatic is lazy. Okay, I get that. The results are okay. They're strong. They're not fantastic, but they're strong enough, I guess. It's interesting through the slalom, however. Well, they gave it some props, right? It goes where it's pointed. The stiffer everything controls things, but when you watched it, it almost clicked, click, click. They said it had a lot of body roll, but it was the way it was rolling. It didn't look progressive like a ship. It looked like it popped. Very, very interesting to me. And no braking.
On the open road, the McPherson strut suspension matches precise handling with a firm but comfortable ride even on rough pavement. With a chassis based on the new Impala sedan, the Monte Carlo SS Coupe is solid and quiet thanks to body structure enhancements like a new aluminum engine cradle and stiffer sheet metal. Braking performance lags a bit, however. 130-foot stops from 60 is an average result for the Monte Carlo standard 4-wheel disc with ABS. And while stability is very good, the ABS system is noisy when worked hard.
What an interesting mix of how they're putting this together, because a lot of this sounds very positive for the car. It's quiet. It's composed. It has a firm but not harsh ride. Everything about it as a car seems to be pretty solid. But the other parts that make it, more performance are all kind of a letdown, right? 130 yards, wow, 130 feet to stop is not terrible, but it's not going to get you up and jumping up and down excited saying, wow, what a sports car. That 7.5 seconds, I think it was, acceleration, that's okay, but nobody in a BMW is going to look at this and worry, right? Like, oh no, the Monte Carlo is going to get the jump on me. It comes down to a really good family car, right? A generic sedan that they are trying to have this halo from the race cars. It's a poser.
Not that you'll think much about work when tucked inside the Monte's big, dark, comfortable cabin. The dash is ultra clean with a very practical layout, but even with low luster plastics, the lack of any bright trim results in a utilitarian look. No complaint about the seats, however. The front buckets are wide and plush, yet very supportive, especially on the sides. Our car's 6-way power and leather are optional. The analog gauges are big enough to read even at racing speeds, and the cluster is comprehensive. The optional CD-equipped stereo is idiot-proof like most GM controls, as are the SS Monte's standard dual-zone climate controls. Less garish graphics are our only request. And this is one coupe with plenty of rear seat room, thanks to 3 added inches of wheelbase and 1 inch greater rear legroom, enough to keep full-sized adults comfy for a few hundred laps. And their luggage as well, thanks to the low-lift 15.8 cubic foot trunk. To help keep you on the road.
I've got to talk about the interior. I do on every video, and I almost hate to here. Yuck. I'll be honest with you. It looks nicer looking back at this 24 years later than it did in person. Brand new. The interior was, to me, as I recall it, icky. And it looks better now. In this video, it looks better. That the dash shape is okay. Fully modern, right? Fully up to date, contemporary, competitive, with the gauges, the shape, big one piece across the top there, and that center stack, but still looks cheap. Oh, it looks cheap to me. And black on black on black with black carpet. What a dreary, dreary place. And it points to what I'm going to say at the end here, I think.
For those long trips, all Monte Carlos come equipped with a tire pressure monitoring system for flat tire early warning, while SS models also get standard all-speed traction control. Not a bad package in our opinion, though hardly a Winston Cup race car. Of course, it does cost a few $100,000 less than one of those. Prices for the base Monte Carlo LS start at $19,850. If you crave the SS, you'll part with at least $22,295. We think that's a good buy in a big 5-passenger coupe, as we grew to understand the appeal of the Winston Cup look, though we wish Chevy would give the SS 8-cylinder performance to match those looks. As do our friends at Automobile Magazine, who said that, with its legendary name and its strong NASCAR association, the Monte Carlo deserves better. Well, maybe next year. We can only wish for a V8-powered Dale Earnhardt Special Edition that Winston Cup fans would really love. But for 2000, Monte Carlo buyers will still get a car that's capable, comfortable, and one that looks like a Sunday afternoon winner on Monday morning and all week long.
All right, so let me wrap up my final thoughts here, and I'm going to start with, if you like this car, I totally get it. Let me rehash that. My first car was a 76 Buick Regal 2-door with a V8. My third car was an 83 Buick Regal 2-door with a 3.8-liter V6. So the idea of a largish car with 2 doors should really appeal to me. It's the intention of this car that, admittedly, I just don't understand it. Now, if you did a Venn diagram of people's interests and wants, on the one hand, you want sporty. Now, there's sporty like an MGB or a Triumph Spitfire. I'm rolling back to when I was a teenager here, okay? That's what I craved. And then you've got a Venn diagram over here, a circle of muscle cars. You crave a Mustang or a Camaro. And then you've got personal luxury vehicles. Okay? Not necessarily my 2-door Regal, but the Thunderbird and things like that. I see the appeal strongly of each one of those shares of the market. The first car I ever really craved, was a 64 and a half, 65 Mustang. Had a friend of mine who had a Spitfire, another one who had MGs. I've driven them all. Loved small British roadsters, right? And then I had my two-door Buicks and really wanted a Thunderbird at one time too. And I get all of those. So the idea of a mid-size platform from GM with two doors totally should appeal to me. But I don't understand the Monte Carlo, and I never have. I've driven, I don't remember what year it would have been, but I've driven an 80s Monte Carlo that just kind of wheezed its way along. The Lumina version, this thing, I don't get it. It's too big to be really sporty. It's not powerful enough to be muscly. I don't think this looks good. That is a personal thing that I am harping on, but I do think this is a hideous looking vehicle. And it's not personal luxury. It's a Chevy, which means, well, they're leaning into NASCAR more than they're leaning into personal luxury. And the interior kind of shows that. This car ends up being just kind of a solid middle-of-the-road performer. A two-door Lumina. But they had to take the styling up. They had to make it look like the NASCAR cars. They had to try to make it have some kind of emotional appeal to people. And it ends up as, I don't see the point. It's too big. I don't like the styling. It's not terribly powerful. It's not a great performer. You're going to be smoked by almost anything else out there. What the heck's the point of this thing? So again, if you love them, I mean no offense, but for me personally as a buyer, man, it doesn't hit any of the points for me of what would make it remotely desirable. Thanks so much for being here, guys. I'll bet you let me know what you think below. Thanks again.